Welcome, everybody, to the Arcane Strategies Arcane Radio podcast. It is the second one of 2020. It's kind of crazy. We're in February already. I feel like January just came and went without any warning.
Yeah, well, we were busy with other stuff.
Yeah, with other stuff. For those that don't know, Mike is a brand new dad.
I sure am.
Congratulations.
I'm wearing my daddy shirt. This is.
I don't think that shirt has the same connotation that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But I'll tell you, he's one of the best bad guys in any.
Agree completely. I mean, and ultimately, really a bad guy though. I mean, I guess that's.
Nah, he's like a maverick of sorts,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
he's like Wolverine,
the anti-hero,
yeah.
but like not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like
but
Deadpool.
So congratulations is the
Thank
point
you.
I'd like to make, and anyone listening, just kind of keep you up to date on our lives. But today we are here to talk about cloud hosting platforms. Mike and I have been talking about different platforms and what they offer, and other things that goes along with having a cloud hosted or hosted cloud. And we're trying to work around different features that we're going to be implementing in our own tools and what we provide to customers, and talking a lot about it. And we kind of as we were talking about it, I kind of got this idea for the podcast and I started the forum. So we held a conversation and decided to get in front of some microphones. So without further ado, I'd kind of wanted to first talk about the different levels of cloud hosting. We'd kind of talked about this a little bit before we started, and how to think of them as like different baseball leagues or different platforms in different baseball leagues, just because it'd be unfair to put them all on the same plane, correct?
Yeah, we're talking about providers.
Yes, providers. I guess I should make that clarification as well. So I have a list of a few here, and I kind of just wanted to rank them in terms of like from the pros down to the lowest minor league. So that would be pros to like AAA, AA, then single A baseball.
And just, so that there's no misunderstanding for viewers who might be looking at this saying like, hey, I always want the pros. It doesn't necessarily mean that the, less complex solutions are not professional. It just means that they may not be necessary for your applications.
Yeah, I would say more of the pros. Look at the pros as more of like they do a whole bunch more, not necessarily they do it better. Would that be a fair way to say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do things differently for different targets.
So here's some I came up with. Linode, Bluehost, HostGator, DreamHost, DigitalOcean, GoDaddy, 1&1, Rackspace, Google, AWS, and Azure. So if you wanted to start, like, who are the pros in that group? I kind of already knew a little bit, but I'd like your opinion too.
Yeah. So as far as pros for cloud service providers are concerned, AWS, Google, and Azure are probably the three reigning champions among the technologies that are a little bit more on-demand affordable versus competitors like Rackspace. Rackspace is probably, I would say, the best in terms of providing that same level of infrastructure with an additional support level. So they fall in that pro category as well. There are definitely, a number of competitors in that area, not limited to Rackspace and Azure and Google and AWS, but those are sort of the reigning champions right now. And then the other guys that you mentioned in that conversation are either lacking in UI and support, or they're lacking in just sort of the raw infrastructure itself. So as far as that list is concerned, that those are your pros. Those are your top
then
tiers. Who
would you say is the next layer down, which would be like AAA?
So like Linode and DigitalOcean are in that conversation. There are a bunch of other like serverless technologies that are out there as well, that are worth investigating, depending upon the framework or the language that you're running. But the idea really in separating those from the other sort of pro players is that that's really primarily about raw infrastructure, and they're intended to provide a really reduced cost for getting an engineer in front of a dedicated virtual private server without really giving them a lot of resources to hold their hands along the way. So whereas Rackspace has what they call the fanatical support, and then AWS and Azure and IBM. IBM's part of that conversation as well. I don't know why I neglected to include them, but IBM is a good example of an enterprise level service provider who has a service level offering that is a lot more advanced than what you're going to find at Linode or DigitalOcean, primarily because those organizations are really focused primarily at targeting a demographic of engineers, as opposed to enterprise level service offerings, which are really targeting middle management and upper management. These are people who need enterprise level support as a backup plan. That said, it doesn't mean that there are not service offering or support offerings at these middle and lower tiers. They're just if you're an engineer and you're like, hey, look, I need a cost-effective solution to getting a dedicated server, and I really don't need anybody to help me along the way, then I would say DigitalOcean, get a DigitalOcean Droplet or get a Linode. I think they're called nodes over there. Get a dedicated VPS over there.
Because you know what you're doing.
You know what you're doing, and it's cost-effective. You're not paying for all the bells and whistles and the brand name and all the additional UI and fancy DevOps tools and additional support levels and stuff like that. If you're really somebody who's looking for a professional level service, you've got a really high traffic type of website, but you need support from somebody because you're not confident that you can do it yourself or in-house. That's when you really want to look at someone like IBM or Rackspace and look for their support levels.
So then I'm assuming then the rest of them would kind of all fall in that the next category, those that are left of kind of extremely price-friendly hosting platforms.
Yeah, and the irony about that about what it is that you just said is that pricing is becoming. It's funny that I'll use the word increasingly low instead of decreasingly low, right?
Yeah.
But it's becoming more affordable over time for virtual private servers to the point where it's almost not cost effective to even go with a lot of these bargain basement hosting providers,
such as Bluehost, HostGator, DreamHost, GoDaddy, One.
Right. So, for example, like you can get a dedicated VPS through AWS EC2 instances for like $10 a month. That'll actually handle a reasonable amount of traffic for the equivalent of what you might pay at SiteGround or WP Engine for a WordPress hosted service offering at like $25 a month. Now, obviously, it's more expensive. The difference here being that those are managed solutions more often than not. So what the benefit that you're gaining is not necessarily that it's a less expensive raw infrastructure offering, although that does exist with GoDaddy. It even exists with like Linode. You could be talking about paying as little as like $3 a month for a lot of those solutions. But if you're looking at a managed services offering and you're looking at even in many of these cases with these sort of lower tiers that are sort of shared, they're not virtual private servers, so to speak. You could still get a VPS, a managed VPS, but if you're going to go with one of those bargain basement shops, don't even bother if you need a VPS. Like if you need a VPS, drop the minor leagues out of the conversation altogether and start talking about raw infrastructure at an organization that really has the interest in supporting it. Where if you want to think of it in terms of like the Planet Fitness model, the bargain basement hosting providers are not targeting. It's not like New York sports clubs. They're not targeting the meatheads for a reason. They're not just like those bargain basement people are not targeting engineers for a reason. They're looking for people who are like, look, I don't know what I'm doing necessarily, and they're like, great, we'll put you on a shared server. We'll give you just like a portion of it, so they'll partition off that server and they'll give you like a dedicated virtual host. And they'll give you cPanel access, and they'll restrict you to like FTP access, and maybe they'll have like some sort of database administrative UI like PHPMyAdmin or PostgreSQL or whatever it is that they use, and then they'll be like sort of send you on your way, and just like hope that you just keep paying your bills without too much hassle, because they're not giving you keys to the castle, so they're not really too worried about.
Nor are they really going to be picking up the phone and answering your call.
Yeah, they'll just be outsourcing you to some sort of call center in the Philippines or India or whatever. So that's really if you're looking at it saying, look, I've got a basic informational website. What kind of hosting do I need? You really don't need to be going into the top tiers. go with a managed services solution that exists within a shared hosting provider or budget solution, and that goes with all those other ones that you mentioned. Yeah, so like there's GoDaddy, there's 1&1, there's Bluehost, there's HostGator, there's SiteGround, there's WP Engine, there's all sorts of ones like that. If you're looking at it, if you're a WordPress hosted person, and I know you didn't ask that, but I know a lot of people who listen to this might be hosting a WordPress site because it owns so much of the market share. If you're looking at the VIP, there's like a VIP hosting solution from WP Engine. Do not even bother with it. It's so extraordinarily expensive. There's absolutely no reason for it whatsoever. There's so many more affordable, less expensive alternatives that are managed solutions. Don't do that to yourself. That said, there are also managed solutions at Azure. There are managed solutions at AWS, and even for WordPress as a sort of a platform as a service that they offer. But if you're going to do that, why go to the majors?
Mm-hmm.
Why pay hundreds of dollars?
Major league ticket prices.
Right. Why pay major league ticket prices if you're just trying to see a minor league game?
Exactly.
Right. So
that's a good point. So, but earlier you had said the increased affordability of some of the pro level services. Is that what you were talking about? Whereas they're trying to. They can offer the same thing that a HostGator or a GoDaddy can at Azure or AWS.
Oh yeah, so in terms of raw infrastructure, for sure, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
The primary difference is like where these bottom tiers are able to. They're not profiting on raw infrastructure. Their profit. Well, I shouldn't say that entirely, but where they are getting their margin from is by providing sort of the Apple model, which is like, let me give you limited access to a product, and I know that I won't have to hear from you very often about which things you've done wrong with it. And so, and that, I know there'll be people out there who argue like, oh, well, there's like the geniuses, Mac geniuses and all that nonsense, whatever. That's irrelevant. The point is like if you're an engineer working with a Windows operating system that you can, manipulate however you like, and Linux and the same way, you're restricted more in terms of what you can do with Mac, because they don't want to give you access to the things that could potentially break it, that could potentially make it vulnerable and stuff. And that's exactly what these budget hosting providers are doing, is they're like, look, we're going to give you restricted access to this. You don't have like pseudo level, root level SSH access to a shared hosting environment. And for that reason, we can make it really inexpensive, because rather than having a managed services agreement for each individual virtual private server, we have one person who manages, or, on a part-time basis, this cluster of shared virtual hosts in a single environment, which is also, on a completely unrelated note, which is also the reason why a lot of people like to look at DevOps tools like Docker, because they can manage a single operating system that's that sort of, has containers that sit on top of it.
Well, I want to talk about it a little bit more, but we're going to do something new. I'm going to do an ad read. This podcast is brought to you by Dad's Tie. If you have a big event coming up where you want to make sure you get that perfect gift, check out Dad's Tie. Dad's Tie is a one-stop gift registry website. Whether it's for your birthday, graduation, wedding, or just because, on Dad's Tie you can create the perfect gift list to share with your friends and family. No more gift cards and gas money or texts asking what you want for the holidays. On Dad's Tie you can add gifts from any website to your personalized gift lists: Amazon, eBay, Target, Best Buy, and more. To top it all off, you get cash back if you purchase gifts off other people's gift lists. You can create your free account today at dadstie.com. That's DADSTIE.com. How did I do?
I thought that was quite good.
All right, awesome. So, back to the conversation at hand. Now that we have these different leagues set up, if you will, we kind of already started to talk about how they compare to one another. I just wanted to get a little bit more specifically, or get more narrowed down topic into how they rank amongst the leagues themselves and within the league itself. So, for example, like in the pros league here with AWS, Azure, Rackspace, IBM, how do they all compare with their transition to the cloud? So if, say, you have a dedicated server on site and you're an enterprise business and you have all this tech and everything put in it, but you're making the jump, right? You're making the jump to the cloud. How do these services or how do these platforms help with that, if at all?
Yeah. So sort of, are we starting it? We're going tier to tier, or we're just focusing on
just focus on the top one for right now.
So out of the box, they don't.
Wow.
Out of the box, you're paying for raw infrastructure. That's all you're paying for. You're not. No one's helping you do anything.
Okay.
If you wanted support, that's where and that's that's the reason why a lot of people are not looking at people who need the assistance are not necessarily looking at those top organizations, because it's a little overwhelming for them. So they might be looking at managed services solutions elsewhere. But even then, they still need to have an engineer who's like, if it's a developer or an IT guy who's doing the migration for them, and they'll hire consultants to do that. As far as like that, so that pro services level is concerned, hands-on assistance is very hard to come by. The benefit of going with someone like IBM or Microsoft Azure is that they're known to be enterprise level services offerings, which means that they're known for their support levels. There's going to be a certain amount that they're willing to do for you, and usually they have solutions architects who are there to help sort of guide you through that. That said, they're not necessarily going to do all the hands-on work for you, but it beats the hell out of AWS, and AWS and Google are really not in the business of support. So enterprise level services are in the business of support. Rackspace is in the business of support. Rackspace, their support. I've worked with Rackspace for a very long time. We don't work with them right now anymore. They're just more expensive than we need them to be. But we also don't really need their support at all. But when I had worked with them in the past, their support level offering is really flexible. They offer support through Azure and support through AWS as well, support for their own infrastructure. They do what we do essentially, but I like to think that we do better. But that if you're gonna be getting an AWS server, why would you contract Rackspace to do the support if you could just get AWS to do support? The reason why is, Rackspace has got fanatical support. They have great support. Their response times are not nearly as good as ours. I mean, that's just a fact, because we just try to give really great response times for lower pricing, simply because that's the only way we can really compete. Mm-hmm. But AWS just doesn't at all. There's like a huge gap between what they consider as support and what everyone else considers as support. Mm. So where they might start at you pay a nominal fee for developer access, which essentially developer support, which is essentially just like you can talk to people about billing and you can access our knowledge base, but we're not going to help you do anything. The next sort of tier up, which is a business level plan, is, and I don't remember the exact pricing now because they change it, because it has been getting more competitive, and Rackspace's pricing changes is actually really indicative of that, which if you were to check out their website now, you'll see it's quite different. Mm-hmm. They used to charge a really large fee, and Microsoft Azure as well. Their managed services solutions for businesses, I think they reduced it by 66%. So
wow.
It went from like a 300 to like a 100 or something along those lines, in order to compete with AWS. Because when people look at AWS, they see like, oh, this is great pricing, until they actually have to deal with the support, and they're like, well, hell, this is terrible pricing because they don't actually do anything. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm paying $100 just so I can talk to someone at billing and I can get access to a knowledge base, but no one will actually do anything. Mm-hmm. They have like hands-off policies there because there's a lot of risk in terms of being accessing people's volumes, their data sets. So they'll say something along the lines of like, we can't touch that for you. We can't actually migrate that for you.
But here's a link on how to read about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
And so hands-on support, if you want that, and you'll look at it on their website, there's a huge step up. I mean, we're talking about going from like $100 to like many thousands of dollars if you want to have the level of support that they expect that a business would expect to receive from an enterprise level service. I think their enterprise level service offering is something like $15,000.
Oh, wow.
Some ridiculous number like that. At least that was what it was when we originally looked at it, which was a few years ago. So forgive me if I don't remember the exact number right now.
The point is, it's a huge jump up if you want to actually talk to someone.
It's in the thousands for sure.
That's interesting.
If you want, it's not if you want to talk to someone. Just to clear that up. You will talk to someone
you just won't
at
get
those other.
done.
You just won't get anything done. If you want someone to actually respond immediately to an emergency and do something about it, you will not get that in any tier that's below $1,000. Period.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen with AWS. Now Azure is known for support because it's a Microsoft enterprise level, so you're going to get a little bit more hands-on sort of guidance there. They do, I know at AWS they occasionally do. They'll do like a screen share where they'll have like, okay, well click this and see what happens when you click this, that kind of deal. It's not really hands-on. You do need an engineer. Rackspace you can really do without an engineer. They are really there to help you. But the real issue is like when you're migrating, it's one thing if you're migrating from like Rackspace server to whatever Rackspace server, or you're running an upgrade on a Rackspace server. It's another thing if you're migrating from someone else to Rackspace entirely. I know that Rackspace actually has a lot of migration tools that are at your disposal. Their email migration support, for example, allows you to do an email migration from another server to theirs because they want your money, so they want to help you do the migration.
They want to make it easy to become part of their ecosystem.
Right, exactly. So, but as far as VPS is concerned, it's a bit of a different story because there's no standardized approach to that. It's not like a standard email. When you're migrating SMTP, you just pop it down or IMAP it over, and then that copies the emails that are all similar formatted regardless of your email server, because it all follows SMTP protocol or Exchange protocol, versus a server that could be completely customized to be whatever framework it is that you're working with, whatever need that you have, and sort of get it. So getting that migration over, oftentimes what you would do is you take an image, right? And then you'd have to migrate that image. Most of these hosting providers do not make it easy for you to migrate an image out of their ecosystem. AWS certainly does not do that for you. You can create images and you can share them to other accounts, but trying to get it out of their ecosystem is extraordinarily difficult. We've had to do that with
some great
Google.
Design for you.
Yeah, we've had to do that with Google before, and like they literally sent us a box. It was like this high, a giant like protective box that had a hard drive inside of it, and it took like weeks for us to get it. So they were like, "Oh, you want to migrate your data? We'll have to put it on this hardware and send it over to you, and make it an extraordinarily expensive and difficult process to do that." So they're not really in the business of being able to do that easily.
From cloud to cloud.
Cloud to cloud.
From some existing form to their infrastructure, it's cake.
From cloud to cloud within their infrastructure, it's cake.
Yes. Sorry.
Cross platforms, not so much.
Yeah.
But that's so to sort of tie into what I guess your next questions are going to be, which is like migrating at a lower tier, like GoDaddy or 1&1 or Bluehost or whatever. They're not going to walk you through that hands-on either, but but they're going to give you the tools necessary to do it on your own with a lot more ease. And so when you're dealing with a managed services environment like that, you don't have to rebuild the kernel. Something in like AWS or whatever, they'll have like these standard machine images for you that you can use to rebuild a new server. And but those are not necessarily, they have no idea what you've got installed in your current server. They're not going to audit it for you and determine what needs to be installed. They're expecting you to do that for you. I mean, that's pretty much across the board. You're going to need a consultant. But when you get into that lower tier, or that lowest tier of managed service offerings with limited access, you're not editing really any of the components of that server. Now, that said, there are some exceptions to that. So I know that Bluehost does this, and I know that a few other hosting providers do this.
Get into the details,
but you could edit like PHP version or whatever.
Yeah, it's just some minor stuff. The next one I had was UI in terms of the interfaces within these machines or within these platforms. And this one, I mean, I'm assuming that most of the pros, quote unquote, all pretty much have a similar UI, and then you can compare one league to the next, I guess.
So, kind of, I would say it's the opposite. It's so most of your bargain basement hosting providers. I don't use the word basement. I shouldn't. Most of your economy level hosting providers will all have. Once you get into their hosting section of their website, like GoDaddy changes their website constantly. It's super irritating. When you get to the actual web hosting portion, that interface is going to look like any other economy hosting provider because they almost all use cPanel. cPanel's a basic user interface for virtual host creation and management. There's one's called like WM. One of them's called Plesk, which is really widely used, but you're going to see cPanel or Plesk pretty much nonstop over and over and over at all of these economy hosting providers. So their UI is going to be the same for the most part. You're gaining access to editing and FTP users, accessing files through FTP, accessing databases through whatever interface that they offer you, like PHP MyAdmin. Or I know that there are a number of other ones like Toad SQL and MySQL Workbench, and so they'll provide you sort of those user interfaces, and it's all very sort of clicky friendly. Here's a picture of a person's face to identify an account, that kind of stuff, and that'll all look relatively the same. That said, cPanel's UI hasn't been updated in over decades that I can recall. So it's going to look a little bit old school, but
so that's all the lower tiers. What about the upper tiers? Are they similar story, or are they different from platform to platform?
So just to knock middle tier out real quick, very different because there are really middle tiers giving you raw infrastructure and not giving you DevOps tools. So UI is not in the conversation really. I mean, they have a UI to access information to some degree on your account, but you're accessing the kernel directly through console, so that's out of the way. Pro level, you're still accessing servers directly through console, but they're giving you a lot of other tools like monitoring tools. So like AWS has CloudWatch. You have different load balancing tools. So you have different availability zones with failover opportunities on AWS and Azure both. You have different storefronts. So Azure has an app store where you can download
kind of like plugins for WordPress.
So does sort of. I mean, they're not plugins as much as they are partner applications. So AWS has in their user interface, they have a tool called SES, Simple Email Service, which is a great way of being able to interface with your SMTP server without really worrying about being blacklisted and spam, all that sort of spam related stuff that you have to worry about with mail servers. And Azure doesn't have a direct competitor for that, so they have in their app store you can download, a subscription to SendGrid, basically. So SendGrid is a partner in that regard, and so there are different apps you can download, or access. So they have a managed services offering for WordPress, for example, platform as a service. You can access that through their app store.
Okay.
So they have an app store that you can access that way. AWS is an app store as well, but they're very different. They're very different offerings. AWS is really in the business of trying to get their IP out there. So they have things like Elasticsearch. They have things like Lambda, all sorts of different intellectual property that they have that they want you to leverage. Whereas Azure is really, as an enterprise level service offering, trying to provide you with as much to access as many DevOps tools as possible that are whether it's through them or through somebody else. And AWS is partners too, and they're also in their marketplace. But they're just different, Yeah.
So it sounds like the UI is all based off what you can do on that platform, and then bring the ability to bring on outside partners as well.
Yeah,
right?
and but the actual navigation for the user interfaces are very different between the two of them. There's the sort of data schema is similar, where you can have a consultant contractor has access to your account, can view your assets and so forth, but how you access it is very, very different than the consistency that there is with cPanel being
okay.
across, because they're all custom GUIs. They are their own user interface.
All right. The next one I have is surface level agreements. So stuff like support and response time, which I guess we kind of already talked to when we were talking about them before. So if you want to move on instead, let's talk about monitoring and maintenance.
So monitoring and maintenance. So maintenance is really part of the SLA situation,
Okay.
Service level agreements. But I bring it up, or I've brought it up because in my mind, your managed services level offering is maintenance, and if you're monitoring something, you'd prefer it to be maintained and restored.
Yes.
But in the hosting world, monitoring and maintenance are, even though they're sort of advertised together, monitoring and maintenance, they're not the same. They're not paired usually at all. And so you have a lot of monitoring software options through all of these pro service level offerings. And one of them is going to be CloudWatch through AWS. It's just a way of.
And is that their tool? Is that AWS's tool, or is that a partner? Or is that the same?
That's through their interface. And that's just a way sort of for you to alert yourself of downtime by email or whatever. And as far as maintenance is concerned, you're not going to get the service level offering that's going to restore your sites for you. Rackspace can do that. The other players really won't do that.
In the pro category?
In the pro category. And then with some slight exceptions, obviously, to any sort of enterprise level service offering that you're getting with IBM or Microsoft. If you're paying for them to do the work, they're going to do the work.
They're going to do it, but it's not usually out of the box though.
Oh yeah, no, it's not even out of the box of Rackspace. You have to pay for managed services, or you have to pay for a support level service offering
for monitoring or maintenance.
For maintenance, monitoring is not. You're not paying for monitoring.
Okay.
With a lot of these, places, these service offerings do it. Give you the option to monitor out of the box. Some of them do charge. I think Rackspace charged. I don't remember if they still do it anymore. But like CloudWatch is free, but you have to configure it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing your own monitoring, but they give you the tools to do it.
What about the other leagues?
So if you're doing, you're basically left to your own devices and finding your own monitoring tools for that middle tier. And then the bottom tier, you're not monitoring anything really.
Yeah.
But as far as maintenance is concerned, that bottom tier is essentially all managed hosting. So they're doing it for you.
Yeah, you're good to go.
That middle tier, it's all up to you. And then the top tier, managed services offering, you're paying for that. It's an additional cost. But as far as managed services are concerned, the idea is really you never have to manage the operating system on that system. They'll do it for you. And I would say probably if you're going with a platform as a service offering with someone like Azure, that's an easy way to accomplish that. If you're expecting managed services for a custom environment, you probably want to look at Rackspace or Arcane in that for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we offer this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we offer managed services offering, because that's why a lot of IT firms do it as well, because these hosting providers are not really in the business of doing that. They're in the business of giving you an infrastructure, giving you limited support levels. If you really want them to do managed support, they're going to charge you up the ass for it. Otherwise, go with a contractor.
Yeah, they're outsourcing the majority of their support to other companies, and if you want them to do it on their own tool, you got to pay an arm and a leg for it, right?
Well, they're not outsourcing it.
Well, not in a direct way. They're not outsourcing it, but they're relying on another company to go look for someone to do it for them.
Right.
In that instance, yeah, it's not like AWS is calling us saying, "Hey, we have customers for you."
Right. Rackspace used to do referrals like that, and I think AWS supposedly does that through the partnership program. But we talked to them on the phone, and he's like, "Dude, there's nothing there." But I know that I worked with a really great Linux managed services provider, this guy named Lee Blakely, who has a company called Reliable Penguin. I worked with them like 15 years ago.
Reliable Penguin.
Yeah, Reliable Penguin.
That's a good company name.
Yeah. As a Linux provider.
Yeah, because I get it because it's Linux, but everyone else is just cute.
But he was referred to us through Rackspace. Rackspace was like, "Hey, look, we've got a managed services provider who can do this for you." And it was,
That is kind of shocking that Amazon doesn't really get more into it. I mean, I know when we talked to that guy, he was, saying a lot of things, but it didn't instill a lot of confidence in me, at least.
Oh, yeah. They're like, oh, you could be a partner. It's going to cost you a lot of money. But really all you get is a badge.
Yeah.
They're not going to refer anybody to you.
It's not like they're actively taking leads and pointing them to people.
Yeah, which is a little silly. Well, it's because they want you signing up for their support offering. The problem is that they don't offer a reasonable support offering.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. They want you people to sign up for it, but they don't give you a economical offering.
Right.
It's either all or nothing.
Right.
Well, I think that's a good spot to stop it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you like the show, send it to a friend or a coworker. You can hear all of our podcasts at arcaneradio.com. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn to get notified for when our podcasts are released. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify to see our podcasts in your feed. Feel free to reach out to us for any questions or comments at support@arcanestrategies.com. My name is Lou. Thanks again, Mike, for talking to us, and talk to you in the next one.
Yep.
Bye.